Okay, you guys, thank you guys so much for coming to celebrate another one of our anthologies. It is never like when we publish or we're in published works, you can't celebrate enough because a lot of times we underwhelm that celebration. And really, this is a big deal to be included in a book like this because you were chosen, because we loved your writing, and you worked with an editor and you went through a lot of work to put your work in here. So you all should be proud of being in here. And I also want to just call out real quick, we have several people who are traveling from outside of our club. Could you raise your hand if you're not from Redwood Writers and you're here? See a couple. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you. Thank you for being a part of this, the anthology. That's really great that you were a part of this. Thank you. So we are Redwood Writers. We are the largest branch in this California Writers Club, and we are very proud of that fact because we're a great group. I'm not biased at all. We're a great group. So I just want to mention, before we kick off the anthology portion of this celebration, we do have our Sonoma County Writers Conference coming up, and that is next Saturday at the Finley Center. And we are still accepting registrations if this is something that you'd like to attend. We have flyers inside there with all the information, but it's from 8:30 to 5 at the Finley Center in Santa Rosa, and it's going to be a great day, just packed with so much information of workshops, sessions, professionals, book sales, you name it, you'll see it there. I also want to give a huge thank you to Linda, who opens her home for these celebrations. Thank you for letting us be in your beautiful home so that we can celebrate our anthologies. And also a huge thank you to Janice, who worked her butt off for this anthology, and it's just gorgeous. I mean, all the stories are so good. There is so much in here. There are so many stories that are packed in here. You'll notice, I noticed the font's a little smaller to fit everybody in. So get your eyeglasses on because we wanted to fit everybody in. So thank you. All right, I'm going to pass it off to Linda. No?
I'll just,
Thank you, Chrissy. Well, the reason that we're such a great club is because we have such great people. You know, we have Sean, past president here, Roger, past president here, Judy over there, past president. I'm a past president. I mean, you know, and when you have your people stick around, then what that's telling you is that you have a good organization. So a lot of people here have been board members. It's really super. Speaking of people who used to be board members, that's Jan Rowley. Jan Rowley has been in this club a long time, and she is always there to help. She's a wonderful Redwood writer. She personifies our motto, which is writers helping writers. I just want to say we'll have a little break, and I actually have bathrooms. So there's one here, and if you need to ask anybody, ask. So thanks a lot. I'd like to thank my friend Kim Winter, who is a poet, and she came today to help me set up early today. It's been a little dicey. We had no electricity last night, and then it rained, and then this morning the electricity went off again, but here we are. So it all just was meant to be. So without any further ado, the famous Jan Rowley.
Thank you all for coming, and thank particularly those of you who contributed to the anthology. I really appreciate you allowing me to put my name next to yours on your work. When you come up, the readers, I want you to state your name, the title of your story. Oh, and everybody, phones off, please.
yes.
Okay, Judy, I do.
No pressure.
Transitions began with a conversation with Judy while she was president of Redwood Writers. And it seems appropriate now that she had the reader list. Judy's story contribution, Word Thieves, is also a perfect fit to begin our program. To view the printed word, open your copy of Transitions to page 22.
I've got the big print version here. My name's Judy Baker, and Word Thieves.
Just a minute, Judy.
Yes.
We have some people that has just arrived.
Oh, sure. I'm happy to wait. I can be nervous for a few more minutes.
Now's the time to tell a joke, Judy.
I am really terrible at telling jokes. I would if I could, but my jokes are terrible. They're really, really bad. Okay. Are we good?
I think there's one more
Is there
coming.
one more person? Okay. Well, I will tell you, and I know Chrissy just said that we're having the conference on Saturday. It is amazing. The lineup and the way the schedule works, you're not going to miss anything. And we have Jeff Goins as our keynote speaker. And I've been following Jeff probably since I first started back into the world of writing. He is one of the smartest, kindest, and most connected people in the world. So I'm thrilled that Sean reached out to him and that he said he would be there. But it's not just Jeff. Kristen Tate is an editor, and she works with one of my heroes, Joanna Penn. So that's the caliber of people. And Les is going to be doing Playtime with Poets. We've got Nina Schuler, who's going to come back and talk about metaphors. So there's a combination of workshops and sessions. Sign up if you haven't already done it, but I hope you all have. We still have people walking in. I'm going to wait till Linda comes back out.
I think we're okay.
You think we're okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
they're roaming.
All right, then I will proceed. No one knows the precise moment when the words began to fade from the books. The librarians don't know. The scribes don't know. The printers don't know. Even the books don't know. At first, people blamed their eyesight for the dimming ink and fading words. Who could have suspected the true cause or the depth of the damage to the knowledge of scriptoria? Marcella Quill, the town's head librarian, scrunches her forehead. Something catches her attention. Must be time for new spectacles, Marcella mumbles after a dark spot niggles at the edge of her vision. Probably a floater or too little sleep. Determined to complete her nightly rounds of tidying up the library shelves, she returns to her task. The wisp appears again in the corner of her eye. Blinking furiously to clear her sight as she bustles into the stacks, she sees nothing out of place until she discovers several dozen open books. Their pages blank. The words have vanished. Marcella is known as a meticulous and attentive guardian of Scriptoria's vast collection of books. Her broad shoulders may be slightly rounded from years spent immersed in books. She's steadfast, deeply knowledgeable, and respected by the community. She can feel the pressure of blood thumping in her chest as it squeezes the air from her lungs. The telepathic connection between the sisterhood of librarians reverberates in each of their heads as they discover more books with fading text across the library system. Murmurs and whispers coat the wooden floors of the library, swirling as fine as pollen, settling into the corners, layer upon layer, adding weight to the particles of fine dust and forgotten memories, growing into the cacophony of distress, blaring into auditory rash. In the days to come,
The library stands emptied of patrons, a place of dread. The librarians held out longest until they too were forced to flee the insidious noise and mysterious blank pages. Seeking refuge from the persistent chatter and disappearing stories, the librarians retreat to pay homage to the trees in the sacred grove of Scriptoria. Instead of a pristine sanctuary nestled in the hollow of Lexicon Valley, the librarians feel disoriented by the changes in Verbum Grove. They stumble and grab their heads, attempting to stop or at least dampen the piercing sound emanating from the grove and worming into their ears. At twilight, an eerie glow shimmers in the grove. Words, barely visible on the surface of leaves, crackles and sparks replace the weird humming. The air is thick with the scent of old parchment and fresh pine. The leaves rustle in a language of all their own, like ancient songs carried on the wind. Dr. Orion Savantini whispers in wonder. Dr. Savantini, a distinguished scriptorian scholar, has always been intrigued by the sacred grove and the mystical properties it seems to possess. He's noticed the subtle changes in the grove over the years, glimpses of words on leaves, unusual growth patterns in the trees, and a faint, almost imperceptible hum in the air when he is nearby. These observations have led him to hypothesize that the grove has a deeper connection to the written word than previously understood. Fascination with the interplay between nature and language is the life work of Dr. Sabatini. He's immersed himself in studying ancient manuscripts that most of Scriptoria's scholars overlooked or dismissed as myths. These texts describe a time when the words of the community were directly linked to the natural world, suggesting a cyclical flow of knowledge between the books and the grove. Through his experiments, Dr. Savantini discovered the unique alchemical property of the trees in the sacred grove. Combining rare herbs found only in Scriptoria with sap from the resident trees, he produced a substance that can absorb and transfer written words. His discovery indicates that the migration of words might be part of a natural process facilitated by the trees. The town, the librarians, the scholars all come to observe the grove. As foliage matures, complete sentences appear and phrases twine around the trunks of the trees. Sometimes all the lines of a poem or a full page of a book are inscribed upon a single leaf. But there aren't enough trees in the grove to hold Scriptoria's words and their wisdom. If they can't reverse or halt the fading words and migration, will their wisdom be lost forever?
Thank you. Now we're all going to go to bed shivering. Because I know Maida is from Texas, I assume that Crossroads, her story, is in Texas. But Maida is in California and a Redwood Writers member. And Crossroads begins on page 295.
Hi, I'm going to be reading from Crossroads, and my name is Meta Strauss. The sun beat down on the dirt streets, grassless yards, and paint-peeled houses of Crossroads. The deserted one-room schoolhouse had closed for summer, leaving countless hours of bored freedom for Logan and Bobby Ray, two 14-year-old boys. When in session, the educational funds and number of students didn't warrant teaching anything but basic reading, writing, and arithmetic, and the kind of science that omitted evolution. "Look, there's that weird guy," said Bobby Ray, hair and freckles the same color as old rusty farm equipment. He turned to his best buddy as the two sauntered down the sidewalk, bare feet blistering on the hot surface. The smell of scorched dirt permeated the air. "He's one of them traveling preachers, the kind without a church." Logan found a shady spot close to the drugstore, motioning his best friend to join him. "I heard he has a direct link to God Almighty." The two boys squinted, their focus on the man and the gathering taking place around them. "Look there. What looks like all the women in town are following him," said Bobby Ray. Logan moved closer. "He don't look all that special to me." Bobby Ray stooped so Logan could get a better look. "My dad says he's nothing but a worthless no-good who wants folks to give him food and money. Says he's staying out on government land. Just look at his hair." Bobby Ray grinned. "It's like sheep's wool just before shearing time. Probably has bugs in it." "He sure is strange, and that's a fact." Logan wiped his sweaty face with a dirty bandana and stuck it back in his pocket. "He don't seem to be a smoker or a drinker, and I ain't seen any weapons on him. I say, let's go down to the creek. It's too hot to do anything else." 20 minutes later, Bobby Ray and Logan piled their clothes under the limbs of a giant cottonwood tree. In complete peace, the friends floated around in the cool water. "Logan, what would you do if you could ever leave Crossroads?" "Ain't giving it any thought, 'cause it ain't gonna happen." "Well, when I think about it, I think of seeing some of the sights in our geography book." Bobby Ray's eyes closed as he talked. "Like some mountains or an ocean, or maybe a big city with skyscrapers." "You're some kind of dreamer, Bobby Ray. All I see is more of this damn dried up prairie, my daddy getting drunk, and more visits to my mama's grave." Their reverie was interrupted by the crunching and crackling of dried vegetation where they'd entered the creek. Bobby Ray screamed and paddled away from the sound. "Snakes! Snakes!" "It ain't snakes, Bobby Ray, or at least not the kind you're thinking about." Logan leaped out of the shallow water to recover their wad of clothes, Bobby Ray right behind him. There, on the bank, was the man looming over them, tangled hair framing his narrow face. He wore a long robe, tied with a wide belt and tattered leather sandals. His almost black eyes stared at the boys, expression impossible to read. Their shorts and shirts hang suspended from his large hands. "You boys missing something?" Tiffany.
Thank you. Next, we have Beth Lewis. Turn your mind to fantasy mode, as Beth, a Redwood Writers member, shares The Angler's Arms, which begins on 1:30.
Hi, I'm Beth Lewis, and this is an excerpt from The Angler's Arms. "Don't stay out too late." Father's voice followed Manny as he rushed out the door of their shack. Manny knew his parents didn't like him spending too much time with humans, but he needed other people, and as far as he knew, the only other person of talent alive outside of his family was the mute boy that the guardians kept in the compound this village served. The king had slaughtered them all and would do the same to every member of his family, including all 4 of his younger siblings, if they were discovered. He wandered the streets until he came across a young woman sitting on a bench outside an inn, watching the river carry away the filth of the inhabitants. He could feel her need for comfort and sat down beside her. "I lived near a beautiful river before I was brought here," she said. "I'm sure this one used to be beautiful. You could close your eyes and try to imagine it." "That was before there were guardians, before I was thrown out here with the rest of the refuse." "You could imagine you're at the river near where you used to live," Manny said, allowing his legs to settle apart enough that his thigh made contact with hers. She immediately relaxed. He knew he shouldn't have used his talent to comfort her without permission, but he was tired of the headaches he got when he didn't help others, even though he never knew if he was risking his life by possibly revealing his talent. The young woman looked over at him and smiled. "I'm Kashana. I know a creek near here that's as clear as glass. Would you like me to show you?" Manny returned her warm smile when he answered, "Very much so." She took his hand and led him past the huts and hovels that made up the outskirts of the village and into the surrounding forest. They walked for the better part of an hour. By the time they reached the creek, the sunset was glowing on its ripples. "Stunning," Manny exclaimed. She responded, leaning into him. Manny was not unaccustomed to the affection of working girls. He'd spent time with humans his physical age, including the leftovers, the children who were thrown out after they reached maturity and were no longer useful to the guardians. He wrapped an arm around Kishana's waist and held her against him while they watched the last light of day fade from the trickling water. She turned to him, resting her head on his chest. "I wasn't going to work tonight. Then you came along." "You don't have to work. I'll walk you home." "No, I want you to stay with me. I want to pretend you want me. Now that the guardians are finished with me, no one wants me." "Surely you have family who want you." She shook her head. "I'm dead to them. When I went home, they wouldn't even look at me," she continued. "I was only 12 when the guardians threw me out. I came back here because I thought maybe I could keep working for them somehow, but no one wants me." "You could go somewhere no one knows you. You could tell them you're a widow. There are a lot of jobs you could do in a city." "There's only one I'm good at." "What did you do for the guardians?" "I was a maid." "You could work as a maid in a city." "You don't understand. I didn't learn how to be a maid. That's what the guardians call the girls who..." As she said that, she turned away and looked at the ground. Manny was beginning to feel the weakening effects of the extensive amount of comfort he was doling out. He took her hand and led her to sit on a nearby stone. "You could learn a trade. You have to try." "I suppose I could go to a city and do the same thing I do here," she said, as her melancholy faded and her attraction to Manny returned. She ran a hand up and down his leg. He pulled his knees together and shifted on the stone. "You don't want me?" "It's not that," he said. "You're very pretty. It's just that..." "I won't ask for compensation, if that's what you're worried about." "No, I don't want you to do anything you'll regret later." "I won't regret it. I want to thank you for making me feel better." Manny felt a moment of panic before he decided she wasn't aware of the true nature of her improved mood. She looked into his eyes. Overcome by an irresistible force of nature, he kissed her lips. She responded with overwhelming enthusiasm.
Brad Shermantine, is it Shermantine or Sermantine? Shermantine, I knew it. Brad Shermantine, a member of Napa Valley Writers, takes us back to the classroom with Ninja, page 271.
Hi, everyone. I'll read the first couple pages from my story. Jack strapped a carton of eggs on the back of his bike. 6 for Daniels and 6 for Oldham. Daniels posted grades this morning. Jack had started doing his homework, a lot of it. He was even doing the worksheets in class, participating, and he was still at 27%, the very bottom of the list. He had only come up 10 percentage points. Daniels didn't care. He was all, "You'll pass if you keep turning in work. If you don't, you won't." Well, he turned in work and not a fucking thing had happened. "The essays and projects too," Daniels said. Jack didn't have time for that shit. As for Oldham, he was a sarcastic asshole. He mocked Jack in class that morning in front of everyone, and Jack was itching to reply. He hated English, but he'd always limped by until now. This was supposed to be bonehead English. You were supposed to pass this class if you breathed. But Daniels was all, "You have to do the work. You have to come to class." Every day he said the same shit. "I take you seriously. I hold you accountable. This is not romper room." What the hell was romper room? What was he talking about? "This work is not hard. You'll learn if you do the work. You'll pass if you do it. Otherwise, you won't pass." God damn, he had done the work and he still wasn't passing. It was well after midnight as he glided onto the empty campus. There was no watchman. Every building was alarmed, but he had no intention of breaking in. He would get away with this because he was always joking and pleasant in class. He wasn't some notorious delinquent they would immediately finger. He was tall and gangly with long brown hair he kept tucked behind his ears and hardly ever brushed. It was clean, though. He took a shower every morning. Well, that's the reason he was always late to Daniel's class. It took a while for his hair to dry. Jack wore dark clothes, including his favorite black hoodie, and he was feeling ninja-like. There was no one around. He could have sung opera if he wanted to, but he was trying to be stealthy. There was plenty of lights on campus, but he skirted them. He headed for Oldham's classroom first, in the science building. Outside Oldham's room were all these tall cactuses someone planted 100 years ago. He had to stand close to the window to throw his eggs so he wouldn't hit the cactuses, and he made a little speech as he threw each egg. He was sending a message, after all. "So, you think I'm brilliant? You called me brilliant this morning when I gave my lame answer to your stupid question about photosynthesis. Well, this is for you. Splat. And fuck photosynthesis. Splat. Who the hell cares about photosynthesis? And fuck meiosis and mitosis too while we're at it. I have no idea what the difference is between those two. Splat." He stopped for a minute to think. He had 3 eggs left for Oldham. He didn't want to waste them. "Here's for pairing me with Stacy. You think giving me the smartest girl in class as my lab partner is helping me. She thinks I'm stupid, and she does our lab reports all by herself. I can't hang with her. She's really into this shit. And here's one for you too, Stacy, for shooting me down when I asked you out. I make you laugh. You told me I'm the funniest guy you ever met. So why won't you go out with me? Take that all over your face." Splat, splat. One more egg. What message would he send with this one? He was all talked out for now. Really, Oldham wasn't so bad. Oldham was usually okay. Jack was actually passing his class because of Stacy. Maybe Oldham didn't deserve all 6. He probably didn't mean to be insulting. He stood there in the night, rolling the egg around in his hand. What could he do with this egg? His PE teacher? Yeah, but there was nowhere to throw it. The gym was huge. The message would get entirely lost. His history teacher? Nah, he liked her. Miss White was friendly. He was failing that class too, barely, but he was confident he could get his grade up by the end of the semester. Miss White was fair, and history was important. Like Miss White always said, learning the past helps us understand the present. Ceramics was fun. No egg for Mr. Simpson. Algebra was easy. He was nearly ace in that class. Okay. An extra egg for Daniels. That fucker deserved it. Thank you.
John Patterson. John is representing Sacramento Branch. He takes us further back than high school in A Mother Brachiosaurus Glimpses the New World, page 191.
Thank you, Barbara. I haven't met her yet. And Linda and Jen. Babe, that's it. You're reaching just fine. I'm not eating the lower ones. They're for you. Brocky adored her 6-year-old daughter, Iso. The little girl learned to hold her neck upright when she was only 2 weeks old and stood a couple of days later. Mom's cooing bursts were loud enough for young Iso to hear them and lean towards her. Mom gathered some leaves, chewed them, spit them up, making sure they were soaked, slimy, and munched to a pulp. Iso could drink her mom's smoothies a few times a day just by sucking, the same way she would drink water for the rest of her life. Brocky's group lived in a beautiful canyon with pleasant warm days. Water draining through the warm canyon misted the land, ensuring the abundant growth of all rooted things. A rainbow of green colors, shades, and tints, streaked by stems of purple, red, yellow, or orange, filled the valley. The plants and trees came in hundreds of shapes and sizes. As her young daughter grew, Mom shared her communal knowledge. Their family had been walking the same trail for generations. Every spring, their group headed north. Then, when the 12-foot grasses fell over and turned brown, they started south again. Brocky didn't know unhappiness, only life. For 40 years, she had been taking in the misty air and walking the pleasant land that yielded under her huge feet. At 60 feet tall, weighing over 40 tons, she was in the prime of her life. Days after Iso started walking, she began cooing with Brocky. Slowly, over days spent eating leaves and drinking water, Brocky shared some basic information about their traveling commune. Iso lived and traveled amongst some 28 adults. The tribe was evenly split amongst males and females, with 11 young Bracos aged 3 weeks to 4 months. Iso, the youngest, wanted to keep up, so she learned to chew quickly. Brocky had to push her away from the rivers because she would easily fill up on water. It was much easier for the little ones to drink than eat leaves because their neck tired so quickly. It took a few months for the Bracos to get strong enough to hold their necks up so they could eat. The adults knew the kids had to overcome the lazy factor of just wanting to drink. They consulted with each other in low coos, keeping track of how long the young had been at the water. If an adult decided a child had drunk enough, they would bump it away from the water. The rest of the group hummed their approval when this happened. The last few mornings, the adults got up a little faster. Little Iso wondered about this. She'd never noticed it before. Rising quietly, the adults formed a large protective circle around the young and looked and listened. No leaves were rustled, pulled, or chewed. No water gurgled. Then, after first softly cooing to each other, they would start their morning routines. On today's walk, Brocky called out to Arv, the group's sage leader. He passed the coo along, and the long-necked group gathered. Brocky started. Short, no-nonsense coos. I found turtle eggshells back there at the edge of the river. A long pause. And half a turtle shell. The group fell silent. This was the third sighting of a plundered nest by someone in the group. No large birds had been seen or heard. Their commune wasn't close to the great saltwater basin where most of the large birds lived. They had heard about the saltwater basin from elder Brachiosaurus stories. The surface there was endless, constantly changing size and shape. It would spread out in front of them before collapsing like a fierce bird showing how big it could be. These communes wanted nothing to do with such a strange place. So it wasn't a bird. Something new had arrived, and it ate eggs and meat. A carnivore.
Please welcome Lisa Schulman, Redwood Writers member. We're changing our schedule just a little bit. We're moving her from the second set to our first set. And we'll be talking about who's going to take her place in a little bit. Lisa's a Redwood Writer member, and she's reading from Fat Tuesday on page 265.
Is that good? You can hear me? Okay. Fat Tuesday.
Name.
Oh, name. My name is Lisa Schulman. The day before her 40th birthday, Myra woke up craving a black leather miniskirt, an ankle bracelet, and long silver earrings that dangled to her shoulders. She could hear Frances and Jeannie bickering in their room over whose Barbie got to wear the firecracker red high heels. Myra added Barbie's stilettos to her ensemble and tossed around the idea of a tattoo to go with it. The sky outside the window was a miserable gray, the tired color of her worn flannel nightgown. Myra closed her eyes again. Just the thought of that Portland sky made her long for a fast car and a snaking highway that would pull her out of the stale skin of her life into something fresh and tight-fitting, damp with newness. The sudden jangle of her phone sent a spangling of gold and purple and green behind her closed lids. It was her sister Addie calling from New Orleans. Hey, y'all are awake now, aren't you? With 2 kids under 5, I'm always awake at dawn, Myra yawned. What's up? Why, it's Mardi Gras, baby. Mardi Gras and your birthday. Myra thought she could hear the bright, brassy sounds of Dixieland jazz coming over the line. My birthday's tomorrow, she said, pressing her ear to the phone. Yes, she was sure she heard music. Tomorrow? Shit, Addie giggled. Oh, well, shared Mardi Gras today. Myra thought she could smell the bourbon on Addie's breath and see her bright red lipsticked mouth stretched wide in a smile. She clutched the phone as if she were drowning and only her sister could save her. What are you wearing? She asked. Her need to know, to see it, to feel it all was so strong, Myra felt feverish. Well, sugar, I had this yellow tutu and a cowboy hat, and see, I wanted to wear them both, but couldn't figure out how they'd go together until my friend Susie, you remember Susie? I've never been there. How could I remember Susie? Oh, well, Susie says to me, Addie, why, you could be the Yellow Rose of Texas. And so, you know, that's what I am this year. The Yellow Rose of Texas. Myra sighed and relaxed her grip on the phone. Now she could see it. Addie's long tan legs emerging from the yellow tulle, her feet in thrift store cowboy boots, a 10-gallon hat pushed back on her curly black hair, and strands of Mardi Gras beads, gold and purple and green, clicking around her neck. A blast of music burst from the other end of the line, and Myra heard the low rumble of a man's voice, like a bee's sweet buzz. Then Addie's laugh rang bell-like from that far-off city of sun and music and color. Hey, I gotta run, baby. Happy early birthday. I don't know what I'm giving up for Lent this year, but whatever it is, you'll be happier not hearing from me tomorrow. All through her morning routine, Myra thought of Addie. Her sister's costume superimposed itself over her own reflection in the bathroom mirror, as if she were an old-fashioned paper doll, posed, waiting for the next coordinated outfit. Myra could almost see the paper tabs at her shoulders and waist. Myra sopped up pools of sticky apple juice and soggy Cheerios. She slapped together PB&J sandwiches. She peeled her daughter's clingy little fingers off her skirt as she handed over the wailing girls to the preschool teacher. And now here she sat in bumper-to-bumper traffic, forcing cold, burned toast down her throat while trying to steer away from the self-pity which lapped at her ankles. You made your bed, she could hear her mother telling her, forever disapproving of Myra's divorcing Jack 2 years ago. Yes, she had made her bed, and now she could lie in it as she chose. It might be lonely at times, but in Myra's book, loneliness was preferable to Jack's constant complaining and bickering that had made her feel as if she had another child instead of a husband. During the crawling commute into downtown, Myra turned on the radio, and the golden tones of jazz poured into the car like fine wine. A ray of weak sunshine glinted off the bumper of the car in front of her, and suddenly she was squinting in the hot New Orleans sun. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she flowed along the street in a river of thousands of other revelers, the feel of satin, tulle, and feathers brushing against her skin. The mask she wore narrowed her vision, broke the world into bright slivers of color and movement, making her feel drunk. Thank you.
I think we have some excellent actors, don't you? They're not just writers, they're actors. Alethea Eason is a Redwood Writers member. She read at the Poetry Anthology last month, and her work was recently performed by Off the Page readers here in Santa Rosa. She reads today from A Short, Sweet Life on page 52.
Hi, my name is Alethea Eason, A Short, Sweet Life, and I am going to begin at the 4th paragraph on page 52. The day I met my first mermaid, I was stupid and went out snorkeling alone after a fight with my wife. I don't think the mermaid noticed me until I'd swum beyond the rocky outcrop that lay 100 yards from the beach. The sun in her hair sparkled like electricity, a phosphorus red, and was long, like you would expect a mermaid's hair to be. Her tail was red, more bronze than her hair, but the scales that laced over the skin sparkled with aquamarine iridescence. She slipped through the sunlit waves. Indigo sparks flashed, followed by deep purple ones, and then a violet afterglow. My eyes strayed from breast to her tail and back again. I guess that puts me in Neptune's passion category. Welcome, the mermaid said when she surfaced again. My name is Marie. I'm so glad you made it out this far. A large wave broke sooner than it should have. I looked back to the shore and realized I was in trouble. The sky was still clear, but farther out the water was lifting again. My heart stopped when I realized the crest would break right in front of me. I held my breath for 3 long seconds as the wave crashed down. When the water retreated to Neptune, Marie seemed unperturbed as she watched my body thrash. When I finally was still, just floating there, she flicked her tail. My wetsuit dissolved, and I found my legs encased in 20 pounds of blubber and scale. Marie had to know I wasn't going to be some hunky mermaid specimen, but I don't think it mattered to her. Still, I was uneasy. I had lost the prescription mask I needed for my nearsightedness, but my anxiety faded when I realized I could see just fine. And my naked body with its new jade green tail was comfortable in the frigid Pacific water. Once I stopped fighting the shape of my new body, relief washed over me. The only thing that clouded the moment was the grief of knowing I'd left my wife, Emily, alone, back on land. Marie whisked the water with her tail flirtatiously. I let myself drift. I've worn a ponytail since my early 20s, and she swooped past my head and freed my hair. I wondered if the mermaid magic would make me younger, but alas, my receding hairline was still there. I was destined to be 52 for eternity. The sunlight shone through the first few feet of water. I looked down to where a cluster of pink sea anemones swayed on a small hill of submerged rock. Their silky arms snatched at the mitochondria that floated by them. Marie swam so close I felt her body tickle my back. Then she was in front of me, holding my waist. Why do you think of her? Telepathy, of course. The next evolution after cell phones. Mer people were a little ahead of their land-loving cousins. Her? You mean my wife Emily? That's private. She wrapped her arms around my neck and pressed closer. I felt myself stir. I couldn't help but be curious about what was going on beneath my waist. I withdrew to discover I had a pouch, much like a codpiece of old. She didn't have one. Your thoughts are so much on the surface anyone could read them, Marie told me. You have to dig down with your mind. Learn to ink your thoughts out if you are going to have any privacy. Well, there was nothing private about what poked against my codpiece. She slowly oozed down my body. I sucked in water and began to choke. She looked up. Breathe through your gills, she commanded, sounding agitated. I let go and forgot about everything, even my wife. I might have been dead, but what did it matter? At that moment, I felt more alive than ever.
Our next reader, Kristen Ray Anderson, wins the grand prize for having traveled the greatest distance for today's launch party. She's an Orange County branch member. Wow. Reading today from Promises on page 17. Thank you, Janice. And thanks to all of the editors and judges and proofreaders who worked on this beautiful volume. Isn't it lovely? So, yeah. My name is Christine Ray Anderson. My story is on page 17, and I'll read the first page and a half or so. From Marla, I learned to bite my fingernails down to the bleeding cuticles. Learned to say sorry for everything, from a burned dinner to the rain. Learned to ache in an empty room. She taught me to maneuver around questions by putting my idle hands to work. Sometimes my brother and sister slipped and called me Mom. Susie was 5 when our parents divorced, and our mother, Marla, went to work. Jason was 6, and I was 11. This was 3/4 of the way into the 20th century, when suburban jobs took workers to multi-story office buildings surrounded by parking lots. Marla was over 30 and, I learned later, hadn't worked since she'd earned pocket money as a car hop in high school. Folks described Marla as quick and bubbly, and I guess because of that, she soon landed a sales position. She moved us into a 3-bedroom apartment. Susie and I shared a room. Jason had a small bedroom to himself. Often, Marla said she had to work late and would come home after I'd already tucked Susie and Jason into bed. Thanks for everything you do, Emily, she'd say when she got home. Her black pumps clipping on the kitchen linoleum, starched blouse loosened a bit, curly hair escaping its bobby pins. She still smelled faintly of Charlie perfume, citrus and jasmine and rose. Even today, those memories catch in my throat. This morning, light from a street lamp filters through half-closed wooden blinds. It's not dawn yet. I turn to see Alan lying on his side next to me, a thin white sheet covering him. He faces away, the contour of his body a slope and a curve. It's early, but I think of quietly slipping out of bed, going to the kitchen and sitting alone, 2 hands around a ceramic mug full to the brim of steaming coffee. Emily? His voice is quiet, sleepy. Shh, I whisper. His breathing softens to regular beats. I envy his dreams. In 2 weeks, we're supposed to be married. Flowers are ordered, dresses sized, priests and church reserved. Our lives will intertwine from then as surely as our arms in sleep wrap around one another, as surely as the sheet now clings to Alan's warm form. Again, last night, we talked. Alan wants a family, he says.
He envisions playing kickball with daughters and sons, teaching them to ride a bicycle, hook bait onto a fishing line. He won't be satisfied with my response. We don't have to decide right now, he said. I have children in my life. I teach 3rd grade. I don't want children at home and children at work. Alan knows, but can't understand. You love children, he said. Your students are crazy about you. Your brother and sister adore you. I think, aren't the 2 of us enough? Thank you.
Another traveler, this time from the Central Coast branch. And handy to have around. Donna Rollins reads from Start Small, page 219.
Thank you. I'm Donna Rollins. This story, Start Small, takes place in Vermont in the winter at an Irish pub owned by a man named Mike and his wife Kate, who sadly had passed away a few months before. So this is the scene I'm going to be opening with, and he is with his dear friend Colin. They're closing down the pub at the end of the night. Except I lost my place. Don't go digital when you come up here. All right. Mike stuffed the cash in the bank bag and poured himself and Colin one last nightcap of Redbreast. They raised their shot glasses with a knowing nod and tossed back the comforting Irish whiskey. They walked across the well-worn oak floors to the front door and exchanged their usual slap-on-the-back goodbyes. Mike locked up the old brick pub as Colin put his jacket up over his ears and trotted through the empty parking lot toward his house a block and a half away. As Mike listened for that final click of the deadbolt and rattled the door handle to make absolutely sure he had locked it, a disturbing sensation came upon him. It felt like someone was watching. He patted the left side of his corduroy blazer, feeling for the bank bag he habitually placed in the inside pocket. His mind raced with disjointed questions about who stayed late at the pub, searching for faces he didn't know, braced and as ready as he could be with no source of protection except his fists. He slowly turned his gaze away from the door in front of him and looked all the way to the right and all the way to the left, but saw nothing except large snowflakes falling under the beam of the security light. Attempting to resist the nefarious scenarios that flashed through his mind, he backed away from the door. Cautiously, he surveyed the parking lot, but again saw nothing unusual. He scurried toward the stairs leading to his apartment, but as he approached, stopped dead in his tracks. There, on the edge of a shadow between the slats of the first and second steps, was a small kitten. Mostly black, except for the white fur around her neck, she crouched down low and fixed her intense golden eyes on him. Releasing the breath he didn't realize he was holding, he said, "Oh, for Christ's sakes, you scared me half to death. Go on, scat, go home, you scrawny little bird-killing beast." Mike couldn't tell if she was scared stiff or just too cold to move, but not even a whisker twitched. Oh, good God. Now what the hell do I do? If only Kate was here, she'd deal with it. Mike ran his fingers through what was left of his once thick red hair and took a slow step forward. The kitten didn't flinch. But when Mike took one more step toward her, bam! She bolted like lightning into the blackness under the landing, and Mike stomped up the stairs, mumbling to himself as he went. Thank heavens that ordeal is over. Before opening the pub, Mike always enjoyed a pick-me-up to get him through until it was an acceptable time to start drinking. He poured enough cream into a cup of deeply steeped black tea to turn it white, and held the mug with both hands to warm and coax his arthritic fingers into another day of work. It was always a day of work for him, except for official holidays, the very days he wanted to be at work, so he wouldn't think about his life without Kate, or on Christmas or Easter or Thanksgiving. Predictably, Colin appeared at the pub about 5 o'clock for a nip of whiskey and a bit of conversation with his friend before dinner. "You'll never believe what happened last night on my way upstairs." Mike was excited to have a story to tell and kicked off their chat with an enhanced version of the tale of a potential thief turning out to be a small tuxedo kitten, and how proud he felt about scaring off the wayward creature. Yet, Colin says to Mike, "You didn't take the poor thing in? Mike, what's gotten into you? Have you no sense of decency? She might have died from the cold last night, and you'd have her innocent blood on your hands, my friend."
My thanks to our next reader, Pamela Heck, for being a member of the editing team for Transitions. Pamela, a Redwood Writers member, closes the first half of our program today with a reading from Leaving Neverland on page 70.
I think that's okay. I'm Pamela Heck, and this is Leaving Neverland. I married Peter Pan. Ironically, his name was Peter, and he never grew up. Not really. But when faced with a handsome 6'3" man on a vintage British racing green BMW, I wasn't thinking about what kind of husband this guy would make in the future. I was totally in the moment. He was hotter than the motorcycle engine revving for my attention. Pausing the engine, he gave me the look. I'd already been looking. The horned Viking helmet he sported made for an easy conversation opener. Nice helmet. Nice legs. Nice bike. Hop on. I'll take you for a spin. I froze like a deer in his headlight, torn between fear and desire. We hadn't even been introduced, and motorcycles scare the hell out of me. Not that I intended to divulge that fact. Just how daring was I? He dismounted and held out his hand. I took it. "Amy," I said. "Amy, it's a beautiful day for a walk in Golden Gate Park, but an even better one for a ride on a BMW. Name's Peter. I moved from Boston to San Francisco on this bike and never had an accident. I'll be careful. Promise." I nodded. Peter smiled, straddled the bike, and motioned for me to hop on. When he kick-started the engine, I wound my arms around him and held on like my life depended on it. Maybe it did. He smelled like fresh air and aftershave. Our journey had begun. Weaving through traffic on the Golden Gate Bridge terrified me, but the view from the top of the Marin headlands made it all worthwhile. Baghdad by the Bay, my lady. Magic, a dream, a romance novel come to life. I would like to tell you that I practiced restraint, that I wanted to make sure Peter respected me before giving in to my carnal longings. But I can't. Returning to the city, we gorged on Chinese food at Yet Wah and ended the adventure at my place. I broke my no sex on the first date rule. Full speed ahead. 2 months later, I gave up my apartment and moved into Peter's roomy flat on Pierce Street. Peter had boasted on one of our earlier dates that he loved to cook and enjoyed cleaning house. He neglected to tell me that while he enjoyed cooking, washing up afterwards wasn't really his thing. As for cleaning, when I realized I'd be spending time at Peter's apartment, I showed up with a toilet bowl brush and gave the porcelain throne a much-needed cleaning. Nobody's perfect, right? One might think that Peter and I would be in no hurry to trade in our happy, living in sin life for one of wedded bliss. However, there were complications. When informed of our new living situation, my mother called in tears numerous times with the same message: "You're going to hell." As for Peter's parents, a sudden longing for a California vacation overtook them. Mike and Sylvia booked a nonstop from Boston to San Francisco and spent a week with Peter and me. Their motive was transparent. They were checking out the floozy cohabitating with their precious son. The pressure was on. I slept in a bit in the morning so Peter could spend some time alone with his parents. They pumped him for information. As God-fearing Catholics, they did not approve of our living situation. Were we serious? What were his intentions? On day 1, Peter told his parents that we had made no plans for the future. On day 2, Peter told his parents, it's serious. On day 3, Peter told his parents, I'm in love with her. And on day 4, he told them, we're getting married. They found out before I did. Peter and I decided against a diamond engagement ring in favor of 2 simple gold bands. We didn't need no stinking diamond, and frankly, we couldn't afford one. At the time, Peter managed a motorcycle shop, and I taught English and art at a private school in the city. We didn't have much money, but we had enough to spend weekends traveling around the Bay Area on Peter's BMW or my VW Bug. On Saturday mornings, Peter played soccer, and the rest of the weekend belonged to us. We explored Gold Country, visited a yoga farm, attended concerts at the Fillmore and Stern Grove. We went all in on the Renaissance Fair, Peter dressed as the Lord High Executioner and I as his wench. We should have charged for all the photo ops people demanded. Peter and I chased each other around the apartment with toy guns that shot foam arrows, gave each other massages on the kitchen table, and made love on a waterbed that felt like sex at sea. I asked myself, if nothing changes, if Peter never changes, will this be enough? And I answered, yes, definitely yes. How many think that marriage lasted?
Thank you, all of you. We're going to take a break. We'll be back in 25 minutes. So have something to eat, something to drink, and come back rested. Right on schedule. Thank you. Mara Lynn Johnstone is the perfect person to start the second half of our program. She's a member of Redwood Writers, the editor-in-chief for the 2023 anthology, One Universe to the Left. I couldn't have managed transitions without her. Today she reads from After the Bite, page 89.
Hello, I'm Marlyn Johnstone, and I'm reading After the Bite. Is this high enough?
Yeah, you're good.
Cool. Getting bitten by a zombie shouldn't have been a relief, but I was so tired. All the panic and the scrambling for safety, the paranoia that someone may have been infected without saying anything, the aggravating frustration that this is so stupid, this shouldn't be happening, it wears on the soul. So when I got too close to a zombie, when I was pulling someone else to safety and lost a painful chunk of my arm, all I could do was yell about it. Everyone saw, of course. Not that I would have hidden it from them, I'm not that kind of jackass, but it was embarrassing. Rookie mistakes get you killed, or zombified, which is basically the same thing. All the science labs in the world hadn't been able to manufacture a cure for something that turned out to be more of a good old-fashioned curse. And they were mostly overrun by now anyway. I didn't object when the group locked me in a side room while they decided what to do with me. I didn't really know this gaggle of survivors that well. They could have easily shoved me outside to join the shambling hordes. Nice of them not to. Those hordes will rip you apart if you're not rotten enough. I settled in as best I could on the folding chair among the boxes of junk. I bandaged my arm with Kleenex and tape, then waited. The bandage was just practical, so blood would stop dripping on my pants. I might as well be comfortable in my final moments. I shifted on my chair. These final moments were sure boring. It had to be close to an hour by now. I called through the door. Hey, anybody got a magazine or something? There's nothing to do in here. I hoped they would shove something under the door, but instead they burst into frenzied conversation. I sighed. Maybe there was something to read in the boxes. Pretty sure all I would find were office supplies. The place smelled like glue and printer ink. I was rotating the nearest box in search of labels when a voice sounded at the door. Are you still okay? Asked what's-his-face, the tall guy, Jared. Yeah, so far, I said. Not gonna lunge at you if you open the door. Promise. How are you still okay? He asked. What? Was my witty response. You should have turned by now. I've seen it happen. Are you sure it bit you? Of course I'm sure. I held up my arm. even though I knew he couldn't see it. The Kleenex was red all the way through. You saw the bite. It hurts. Is it turning green at all? Fine. I guess I need a new bandage anyway. I'll look. I picked at the edge of the tape to get a solid hold on it. I didn't plan on having to rip tape off my arm hair shortly before death. You're cruel, you know. More whispering. No direct answers. I pulled off the tape, which was exactly as painful as I'd expected. Ow! Fart knocker! What? Is it decaying? No, you turd weasel. I just bikini waxed my wounded arm. The Kleenex had even stuck a bit, making everything worse. I was bleeding on my pants again. I grabbed more Kleenex and pressed it into place. Nothing green, just very red and getting everywhere. Jared paused. How are you still healthy? He asked again. I don't know, I said in exasperation. I'm trying to come to terms with my impending death here. You don't have to get my hopes up by asking about how long it's taking. More voices talked quietly. Then the older lady spoke up. Answer truthfully, she said. Are you a vampire? What? I burst out. Are you kidding me? Vampires don't exist. Neither did zombies until now, she said. Answer the question. No, I'm not a freaking vampire. Other people sounded like they were giving her suggestions. Are you a lich or a ghoul? What the hell? No, why would you even ask that? She kept her cool. The writing on that tomb said that the dead would devour the living. The zombies don't attack each other. To the best of your knowledge, are you, or have you ever been, a member of the undead? No. Well, I had to pause at that.
I first met our next reader at a Redwood Writers Christmas salon. This has been a number of years ago at Sandy Baker's home. He presented each attendee that night with a Kennedy $50, which I still have.
I don't have any today.
Ask him for the story behind that gift. Today he will read from The Talk, page 124.
Like your outfit, John.
Those of you who like my outfit, raise your hand. Oh, I've never had a unanimous vote before. I'm a little different from what the others have been reading because I misunderstood, I guess, and it'll take 5 minutes, but I rewrote my story, and it works out better that way. Anyway, it begins with an aphorism. Woody Allen said, I'm not afraid of death. I just don't want to be there when it happens. And so you know what I'm writing about. So, it's called The Talk. Jeanette, on our drive to Pacific Grove, the landscape morphs into sand dunes prior to our Del Monte Boulevard turnoff. Jeanette works a crossword puzzle beside me. She lifts her head and says, yes, John. What if I go first? I say, expecting her to say she'll miss me. She says, don't say that. Why not? Jeanette responds, because I'll be going first. And she leans back in her seat. We met at a church singles event a decade ago. Petite and by her own admission she weighed 107 pounds. We enter Monterey's tunnel as I ask, what's new at Sunset Manor, where you live? She turns to me and says, I joined a stroke survivors support group. Survival time for women my age is 6 years. My stroke happened 5 years ago. I rub away an itch under my nose bandage and say, you've got longevity genes in your DNA. Your mother lived to be 93. Jeanette says 94. I say, you've been correcting me for 10 years. Jeanette says closer to 11. Checking into the 1887 Gosby House mansion situates us in downtown Pacific Grove and within walking distance of 3 good restaurants, Fandango, the Red House, and the Passion Fish. Jeanette calls them the Bermuda Triangle of desserts. I choose the Red House Cafe for dinner and order a cheesy stuffed portobello mushroom for vegetables. Jeanette orders a brownie with chocolate sauce. I object. I say, you can't have dessert until you've eaten everything on your plate. Jeanette says, that's what Republicans tell their children. Democrats can eat dessert anytime they want. Our server looks at my nose bandage and says, oh, Mohs surgery? She points to her eyebrow and says, can you see my scar? I look and say, not at all. Knowing Jeanette likes poetry and beaches, I say, we're only a walking poem from Lover's Point Beach. Respectful of her balance issues, I ask, how do you feel about walking by streetlight? Confident, she says, I'll just look ahead to where my feet are going. I button my jacket. She wraps a scarf around her neck. A tippet, I ask? English major Jeanette says, only to Emily Dickinson. To me, it's just a long, warm scarf. Stars above bless us with a clear night sky. I talk about how my vision of reciting poetry with her on this beach helped me endure 3 rounds of Mohs surgery. Every time the nurse covered my face and chest with a heavy blanket and left only my nose vulnerable, I braced myself because I knew a needle was approaching. Jeanette responds, did you bring me down here just to tell me you're cancer-free? I say, I hope our conversation will transition to our final plans. My final plans call for cremation and spreading of my ashes on a sunny hillside, no funeral. Jeanette says, my will has directions for a funeral or a memorial service. I'm not ready to, no, she doesn't have. My will has no directions for a funeral or a memorial service. I'm not ready to face eternity. She leans into me and says, I can't tell you my final plans, honey, but I can tell you this. I give thanks every day for our time in Butterfly Town. She kisses me, which ends the talk, while wrapped in a blanket older than our relationship, a blanket resting on sand older than time, under stars my ancestors saw in Canada, her relatives saw in Utah. The same stars our grandchildren and great-grandchildren will see wherever they live on this planet. Thank you.
Roger Lubeck is president of California Writers Club and past president of Redwood Writers. He's also the publisher of Transitions. He reads today from Damocles, page 138.
I mentioned to Brad that I have a picture of me watching Romper Room with my doobie. Just to date myself.
Did you have the romper stompers too?
I don't believe those were in existence yet in 1953. Maybe. Roger Lubeck, Damocles. I'm surprised to find Bert's all-night diner and bar empty. New Orleans never sleeps. At 3 a.m, the bar stools and the booze are normally filled with hookers, sleeping drunks, and drug addicts. Originally, Bert's was a shotgun house built a century ago for black workers, employed by a now abandoned factory. The bar runs half the length of the building with a kitchen behind the bar. At the back, there is a window booth at the front and 5 booths across the bar. At the back, past the 2 restrooms, is a curtained-off room with a small stage and dance floor. Bert's has music on Friday and Saturday. This is Sunday. Bert's behind the bar reading the daily racing sheet. He and I go way back. Mr. D, he says, what will it be? Coffee with room for cream and extra sugar, I say. Not hungry? Any donuts, I ask. Not until 4. Just coffee, I say. Good news. Donuts mean cops. Cops and I don't mix. Coffee in hand, I check out the bathrooms and peek through the curtain. Satisfied that I'm alone, I sit at the last booth before the restrooms and sip my coffee, waiting for the caffeine and the drugs to kick in. The need, sorry, it's hard, I've got this thing across it, it's hard to read. Tracking is never easy. The older I get, the more I question the sensibility of it, the need for it. A college crowd, 2 boys and a girl, stagger in from the bar down the street. The girl is overly made-up blonde with large, half-exposed breasts. She collapses in the window booth in front, laying her head against the window. A small, skinny boy takes the seat across from the blonde. The other boy is large, with broad shoulders and a beer belly. He orders burgers and fries from Bert and then sits beside the blonde, his arm around her shoulder. Alone, the blonde might be a good choice for a hunter, but her large boyfriend would make the play more difficult. The second girl stands at the diner door, scanning the room. She is pale with short jet black hair, violet eyes, and a wide mouth. Her lower lip has crimson-colored lipstick. Her upper lip is painted black like blood. Her eyebrows have been penciled into a V shape, giving her an exotic look. She turns and glances my way. The blood coursing through her jugular makes the skin on her throat glow pink. Her violet eyes dark back and forth. Tasting the air, I sense something hiding beneath her cool, dark demeanor. She might be a first-time hunter going through the change. Taking $1 from my pocket, I select E17 on the mini jukebox in my booth. I Feel Love by Donald Simmer. The electronic beat sets the mood. Donna and disco made hunting easy in the 1980s. I stand and slow walk towards the front booth, my eyes focused on the violet-eyed girl. I stop and wait for Donna to begin. Ooh, so good. Ooh, so good. Ooh, so good, she sings. I approach the girl. Would you like to dance, I ask. She gives me an appraising look. Wetting her lips, I see sharp teeth. Fuck off, man, says the fat boy. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the young lady. I give him a hard look. Tommy, call the manager, says the blonde to the fat boy. He looks dangerous. I don't know about dangerous, but he certainly stinks, says the other boy, trying hard to sound both brave and clever, his eyes betraying his fear. I mean no harm, and my smell is natural. Oops, sorry. Got the wrong page. I stare at the girl. The connection is there. I lean down. Donna Summer, I tell her softly, stirs the memories in me, and I feel the need to dance with a pretty girl. Where can we dance? The girl asks. Well, there's a small dance floor at the back of the diner. I take her hand. Violet, stay where you are. Freddie, get the owner, says the blonde to the skinny boy. Violet, beautiful like your eyes. Dance with me. I think you're ready. Ready for the dance. She looks deep into my eyes. I am ready, she says, walking ahead of me to the curtains. This is not the story you think. Just warning you.
Your program will show the next reader is Lisa Schulman, whom you've already heard. And she was taking the place of Suzanne Solomon, who has COVID, unfortunately. Oh. So that's why we did a little shifting around of people. So next you're going to hear Thies Sweckhammer. I love her name. Thies like in Nice, France. And I really appreciate her filling in sort of at the last minute. She's going to be reading from her story, Bread, on page 308.
Thanks, Mom.
Hi, like she said, my name is Thies Sweckhammer.
Closer to the microphone.
Oh, okay, thanks.
T. Swackhammer, and the story's on page 308. I'll just be reading the first couple pages. You must not repeat to anyone what I am about to tell you, my mother said. You understand? I sipped a Pinot Grigio in her kitchen as she chopped carrots for soup. Your father had a phobia about bread. Bread? You don't remember? She expertly rocked a chef's knife, making quick business of 5 carrots, then scraped them with the spine of the knife into a boiling pot of soup. He would pitch a fit if he found bread upside down in the bread box. I added an ice cube to my wine, assuming my mother wouldn't object since it was a twist top. You know, I do remember an over-the-top moment with him over bread once. I had just made peanut butter toast. He spotted the loaf upside down next to me and yelled something about me being reckless or careless or something. That's nothing. She turned the burner down and started on the celery. It was far worse than that. I leaned over to sniff the pot. My mother put her hand on my chest. No sniffing. No one wants your nose droppings in their soup. I grabbed a saltine cracker to tide me over and leaned on the kitchen island. Of course, I should have known better than to come within 3 feet of her cooking. At first, she went on, he would turn the bread right side up, but then that wasn't good enough anymore. The heat from the stove curled her bangs, a strand of which dangled above her right eye. Her floral apron had a tiny split seam on the pocket. I pulled some brie from the refrigerator. My mother shot me a disapproving look. I know, better with red, but I'm hungry. She snorted. Suit yourself. I cut a few slices of baguette, stuffing the brie inside the small soft centers of the bread. Just as I was about to take my first bite, I shrunk under her stare. What? Your father, she sighed, adding the celery to the pot, then held up the serrated knife I had just been using. He'd find the bread upside down and shred it in the garbage disposal. But first he'd slice, no, hack at it, like he was trying to kill it. She stabbed at the air to demonstrate. That's a bit dramatic. You think I'm exaggerating. She folded the cheese into its wrapper and returned it to the fridge, a signal that I was done eating bread and brie. Aren't you? She shook her head. You don't remember the incident then. I suppressed a smile because now she sounded quite serious. A freshly baked loaf had accidentally rolled off the counter onto the floor and landed upside down. She chugged the soup, adjusting the flame to a simmer. Your father stared at that bread like it was a demon. His hands gripped the counter. She grabbed the edge of the tile for effect. He brought the loaf to the cutting board, contemplating his next move. She placed 2 forks and chilled salads on the island, pulled up a stool, but stayed standing. This time, instead of destroying it, your father waved his hands over the bread several times. He didn't know I was watching. I saw his mouth moving, as if he were casting a spell. I served myself some Pinot Noir from an open bottle, because of course the white wine did not pair well with the cheese. My mother smirked a tell-all, I told you so, grin. It was the time our neighbor, Mr. Miller, was found dead in his home. I held a forkful of salad in midair, gaping at her. The same night, your father brought him that bread. What? I nearly choked. You're telling me that Dad gifted him voodoo bread and the man died. That's right. She ate tiny little mouthfuls, pecking at her salad like a bird foraging. That's not possible. A cherry tomato nearly squirted out of my mouth. I pushed it back with a bare finger, struggling to remember that night, the sirens blaring so close to our house, the lights of the ambulance flashing. I was 10, right? Yes. And Mr. Miller had a wife and a boy about my age. That's right. So why didn't they die? She held up one finger to finish chewing. Because he cursed the bread only for the father. I stabbed at my salad. And why would he do that, even if he could? Because Mr. Miller poisoned Caid. Thank you.
Brian, Brian Shea comes to us today from the Mount Diablo branch. He is reading from the Persimmon Constellation, page 262.
Hi everyone. She's right. I'm Brian and I'm reading from the Persimmon Constellation. My first story in an anthology this year featured some talking birds, but I promise no talking animals in this one. Absolutely not. I didn't even know her brother Joe said. And so Liliana drove by herself to clear out Grandma's little house after the death. Liliana's back now showed the same hunch Grandma had, back in those summers long ago when Joe stayed in the valley plucking cabbages and plums with the crew he wasn't big enough to be a part of. The Liliana's parents sent her away to stay with Grandma in the cottage in the foothills. As she pulled into the narrow driveway, sun frolicked down the sloped orchard, spilling a glare between bare branches locked in spasms like arthritic fingers that couldn't capture the light. Yet inside the cottage, darkness prevailed. Mood Liliana didn't recall from her visits. Only the scrolled base of a brass floor lamp glinted, fragile and tentative, like the radio signals Grandma dialed in when she prepared food. The enameled hard candy tray beckoned like it used to, though now it offered only dust. Liliana sank into the worn rocking chair where Grandma would plant herself and tell humorous stories. While reflecting on her summers with Grandma, Liliana sensed a presence behind her, hovering and watching like a dragonfly. She turned to the small kitchen. No dragonfly, though that's where her imagination was nurtured. Using short paring knives, Grandma whittled carrots, nicked cucumbers, and molded rice, deftly transforming them into characters. Food was family. Food was life and joy. Food was history as well as the future. The kitchen was joined by a pantry, no larger than a closet, that led to a skinny back door and then down steps into the orchard. During summers, in the cottage in the foothills, Liliana loved making believe and playing in that tight space behind the kitchen. She'd close her eyes and turn in circles with delicate ballerina steps and imagine herself flying among the flocks of shriveled emu and fuyu persimmons suspended by impossibly thin threads. Each fruit from her grandparents' orchard was the same, yet different, the way people were. Because the little room was built unfinished, Grandma thumbtacked fruit crate labels to the walls and the ceiling. Many said Pen Rin from the fruit trading company, down at the next junction of Rock Springs Road. The improvised wallpaper was taunted by gravity, but Grandma had been stronger, applying tacks that still bit into the wood. Standing there now, a lifetime later, Liliana was still enchanted by the bright colors and dynamic renderings of trains, Indians, beefy block letters, a sunny Golden Gate Bridge, and maidens in wispy robes, cradling fruit baskets like babies. The earlier labels were obscured, allowing only a few letters to squint out, so ears was all that represented Pioneer Mountain pears, and blue goo stood for blue goose, Lake County bartlets. Mixed in among the layers were a dozen or so handbills in rough paper, printed in army green ink. While mostly in English, they also featured Japanese characters. Dress nicely for all, be like-minded, work hardest at home. Watchful neighbors make good neighbors. People Liliana grew up with didn't talk like that. When she was at school, her friends had dressed in ripped jeans and sported green or pink spiky hair. They voiced opinions. They were boisterous and defiant. When Liliana asked about the phrases on the posters, Grandma would remove herself, like she had to get away from something in that little room. Then, from the rocking chair, she'd hold out the candy tray to entice Liliana to sit with her. Come, my green-eyed avocado girl. And her hard eyes would soften as she told an amusing story that might start with Grandpa climbing a ladder in the dark to check the orchard fruit, or one of her own adventures with the dog she bought after she came back from the camp in the desert alone. Grandma talked often about the dog, but never why she lived alone.
M.P. Smith wins the prize for representing the most branches. She's a member of Redwood Writers, Fremont, Sacramento, North State. She reads today from They Don't All Wear Capes, page 279.
All right, I was going to read off my computer, but it's too bright. So, They Don't All Wear Capes by M.P. Smith. Surely she's memorized her shoes by now, Russell said, unable to keep quiet any longer. He'd been pacing a 10-foot path and annoying his co-workers at the Prentice and Conklin Business Solutions firm for over an hour. David, who shared a cubicle with Russell, laughed at Russell's comment. He had the same window view of the despondent woman on the park bench across the street. They had watched her as she studied her shoes, flailed her hands as she talked to an imaginary friend, and wiped tears that still flowed. Russell wrung his hands. Shouldn't we call somebody? Who? Asked David. The police. Boy, that sounds lame. Or her mother. Even lamer. David gave him a look. It's not a crime to cry on a city bench. I think we should do something. This attempt at newfound strength was out of character for 25-year-old Russell Bixby. Known as the milquetoast of the office, stoop-shouldered and afraid of his own shadow, Russell found it challenging to speak to any woman under the age of 80. Leave the we out of that sentence, said David. After another 10 minutes, Russell couldn't continue watching the pitiful young woman in the blue pantsuit crying her eyes out. His imagination ran wild, and he certainly wasn't getting his work done while he paced and worried about the distraught woman. He stole the tissue box off of David's desk and headed for the door. You're going out there? Asked Lisa from the marketing department, who had joined David at the window. You've never spoken to a woman in your life who wasn't your mother, or me, and that's because I remind you of your grandmother. Russell's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard and took another deep breath. Then it's about time I did, he said in a not-so-sure voice. His knees shook as he pushed open the heavy glass front door. Russell felt like a fool once out on the sidewalk. What am I going to do? How can I help her? He shuddered at the thought of speaking to her. And what'll I say? He wanted to spin around and go and return to the safe cocoon of his cubicle and his desk with the Lego Star Wars characters marching across it. But when he swiveled around, he saw Lisa and David staring back at him. A host of other faces from the accounting department had joined them at the window. Lisa made a little go-on motion. Russell was close enough to see David smirk. With a new resolve to show his work friends that he could speak to women without spontaneously combusting from fear, he strode across the street. As his shadow crossed over the young woman, she peered at him. Her red-rimmed eyes trickled tears and her nose leaked, but the brown eyes glanced at him without the usual disappointed look women typically bestowed on him. He wondered if she could see him as a man with a solution. Yes, he's not just a rescuer. He's a guy with an answer. He straightened his shoulders and adjusted his gray Harris plaid jacket to fit the part. A man with a solution, he repeated under his breath. He needed to help this brown-eyed damsel in distress. Now to figure out what to do. Hi, I've noticed you sitting here, he said. Brilliant opener, Russell. She's sure to tell you her life story. What? She stared at him with bloodshot eyes that could double for movie props in a horror film. For a long time, he continued. She stared at him with a blank expression, as if she couldn't place him in the timeline of her young life. He guessed she must be in her early 20s, a far cry from his matronly woman comfort zone. Well, the thing is, are you okay? I'm as okay as I've never been before, she said with a deep sigh, sounding older than she looked. Well, that is unexpected. It sounded to Russell like she'd been practicing that line for a while. Yeah, the thing is, you said that already. She apparently is not in the mood to be friendly. He cleared his throat and began again. I know. He took a deep breath. Are you all right? He paused, but she didn't answer. Do you need help? A ride home? A bright idea showed up on his face. Need to borrow my phone? I mean, I'd like to help you, if you need help. Once again, Russell, you're proving you're a man of words. As much as Russell wanted to sound strong and superheroic, her defeated appearance stopped him in his new wingtips. She twisted her face up at him from her chipped paint park bench, gave another long sigh, and said, My house burned down last night. She nodded, then put the final nail in the predicament. I lost everything. Russell choked a bit, not expecting a tragedy of that proportion. He thumped down on the bench, almost missing it and landing on the concrete below. Gosh, I'm sorry, gosh. But I'm a team player, she said, pulling a few tissues from the box he had thrust at her. I went to Target this morning in my nightgown. I bought this outfit and was only 15 minutes late for work. Well, I got fired. She let that sink in. I guess my house burned down wasn't on the list of acceptable absences or even 15-minute tardy excuses, so they let me go. Stunned into silence, he couldn't find a single word. After the fire, I thought I could hide out in the office, sleep there, and use the gym showers until my house got sorted out. But she made a weird noise and raised her hand to mimic a bird flying away. It's all gone. Even, she choked, even my cat is missing. Her tears returned hot and heavy. Somehow she was in Russell's arms. His mouth formed the word, oh, and he didn't know who was more surprised, him or the folks probably taking bets from the office across the street. He gingerly patted her back, which evolved into a tight, comforting hug. Her hair still smelled of smoke from the fire. It was a pleasant scent, reminding him of campfires and marshmallows. Russell, focus.
So Gary, coming up next, and John must have had a conversation because Gary has also rewritten his story. Now, he rewrote it so that you could understand it better in the shortened form. So this is Gary Nelson, a member of both Redwood Writers and Marin, and his reading is an excerpt from his novel Hammer. The story is entitled Hammerton, or it was.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It really won't be able to be told from this reading, but I started this story 17 years ago, and the premise of the story was a woman senator from California running for the office of president. So and this is a snippets of the submission. The scene begins with a young political speechwriter leaving Heathrow Airport, driving to the town of Hammerton, just northwest of Cambridge. He was asked to visit the town by his grandmother, as it was their ancestral home. He arrives at Hammerton, a scattering of 8 thatched roof houses. He meets a lady who gives him the keys to a church that overlooks the town. This is the reading. Inside, the church showed the same stone construction that made up its exterior. The stones were set without mortar, buttressed with more of their own, able to withstand the centuries in a land where few castles had been as fortunate. Alone in the church, Rodney felt in awe of his emotional connection with the place and the power of the structure to elicit it. He moved down the right-hand aisle. At the 4th pew from the front, just above the ground level, set into the wall was a rose-colored slab of marble. Rodney knelt, his fingers running lightly over the inscription that was carved into the monument. Knight of Hammerton, 1268. Rodney stood back, away for a better perspective of the stone. Bumping into a pew, he turned to steady himself and saw that he was not alone. In the back of the church was a young woman. She was watching him, her hands clasped in front of her, in a relaxed attitude that spoke of her being there for some minutes. As the woman moved toward him in the poor light, Rodney, a man who wrote speeches for a senator, found himself speechless. My name is Catherine. I'm a docent at the church. The woman who keeps the keys tells me that you are a Hammerton. My grandmother is a Hammerton, said Rodney, taken aback at the sudden appearance of the woman. Please pardon me for being so forward, but the Hammerton family is very important to this village. Was your grandmother married to Alistair Stoner? Yes, he was my grandfather, answered Rodney, wondering at the woman's knowledge of his family. A sigh, followed immediately by a smile. Radiant, even in the diffused light, came across Catherine's face. Nice to meet you, Mr. Stoner. She spent the next hour walking through the church and graveyard with Rodney. How did you know about my grandfather? The woman who gave you the keys is an expert on genealogy of the Hamiltons, explained the young woman. She thought that she remembered that your father was an only child. Is your grandmother still alive? Yes, very much so. And your father? Yes. I see, said Catherine. Perhaps you should know that at present you and your father are the only males left in the Hamilton line. That can't be true. The only males? Unless you have brothers or a son, said Catherine, looking directly at Rodney. No, I have no brothers, and I'm not married. Stoner hoped he was correct in noticing a slight smile at the mention of his marital status. Enough of my curiosity. We get so serious about Hamilton minutiae. What brings you to England? Asked Catherine, changing the subject. I'm supposed to be doing research so that I can place appropriate references to English history into the speeches of a senator might need to make after the monetary conference. A sudden thought came to Rodney, and with it, a smile to his face. Tomorrow evening, there's an official function that I'm obliged to attend with the senator and his wife. It's at the U.S. Embassy. Usually they're boring, but this one could be fun. The two front runners of their party's nomination for president will be giving speeches. I know of no one in England. Would you consider going with me? Asked Rodney of Catherine. She glanced at the church, giving her time to consider the invitation, and then turned back. I'd love to go with you, Mr. Stoner. Great, said Rodney. I'm afraid it's formal. I'll see what I can do, said the young woman with a laugh that reminded Rod of tinkling of silver bells. It felt like his entire life had changed since asking for the keys to the church. Rodney drove back to Heathrow with great anticipation for seeing Catherine again and the wonderment of his newly found heritage. Thank you.
Our next reader is Lenore Hirsch, a Redwood Writers member, reading from The Locket, page 83.
Thank you. I'm Lenore Hirsch, Redwood and Napa. The Locket, which I'm going to read the beginning of, is from a series of stories I wrote to answer the question, what might you encounter on a drive, a bike ride, a stroll on the deck of a ship, or in this case, a walk in a park, that could change you or change your life forever? The Locket. Eleanor walked briskly through the crisp spring air. She used to clock her times as she jogged in this park surrounded by vineyards. Now she enjoyed a slower pace. It was enough to feel her heart rate rise and to breathe rhythmically while her feet, hips, and arms moved of their own accord. Lots of folks listened to music or books while they exercised or played podcasts. Eleanor would rather hear the birds and rustling of leaves. It was usually a meditative hour. Today, however, was different. She couldn't get out of her head the unkind words spoken to her last night by that annoying Betty Stein. They had both been in the book group for years. Each of the 12 gals was assigned a month to pick the book they would all read. It seemed fair. The book Eleanor picked for this month was a light-hearted romance. Not a bodice ripper, those were ridiculous, but a sweet story about a woman left by her husband who finds love with someone new. Most of the women enjoyed Eleanor's book, even if it was an easy read. But Betty tore into it, and Eleanor felt into her for suggesting it. I didn't feel it was worth my time, Betty said. It's pretty lightweight. I'd rather read a book with depth. The previous month, Betty had selected a novel set during the Holocaust. She introduced it saying, "This book makes me feel more connected to my Jewish roots in Eastern Europe." Eleanor tried to read the book. It had too many scenes of cruelty and death. She put it away half-read and kept quiet during the group discussion. The brutal Holocaust imagery made her shudder. It's over. Why do I have to keep reading about it? The group's next book would be a relief, contemporary fiction. If it included murder and mayhem, at least it would be on a smaller scale and not from real life. Eleanor paused her walk and took a deep breath, relishing the sweet scent of blossoms on nearby trees. As she leaned forward for a long, satisfying exhale, something sparkled in the grass a few feet in front of her. Bending forward, closer inspection revealed a gold, heart-shaped locket on a slim, broken chain. An inlay of mother of pearl decorated one side. Faint initials, D.H., were engraved on the back. Inserting her thumbnail, Eleanor popped open the locket to reveal a black and white photograph of a man and a woman. Old-fashioned curls framed the woman's face. Lace adorned her throat. The man sported a long mustache, a stiff collar, and a fancy cravat. An old wedding portrait? Eleanor saw nobody else on the trail whom she might ask about the locket. Such a shame. The gold heart must be a personal keepsake as well as an item of monetary value. She slipped the necklace into her pocket and zipped it up. Back at home, she was eager to start the new novel for the book club. It turned out to be a detective tale about a female cop who interviewed people of interest, not at the police station, but at her favorite coffee shop. Finding her inquiry low-key, the witnesses relaxed and let information fly that, under pressure, they might not have remembered. The murder at the beginning of the book was thankfully depicted without graphic details, and each chapter ended with a clue that made Eleanor want to keep reading. A couple of days later, preparing to walk, Eleanor grabbed her jacket, felt something in the pocket, and remembered the locket. She took it out and rubbed her thumb over the smooth surface once again, turned it over to examine the engraving, and opened it to gaze at the photo. Someone is surely sad to have lost this, she thought. Leaving the locket on her desk, she went out for a walk, wondering, how might I look for the owner? Later that day, Eleanor sat at her computer and opened the link to her Nextdoor social media platform. Never having posted before, she laughed at the messages that received the most attention. Can you identify this critter in my yard? Or a dim photo of someone taken with one of those doorbell devices. Do you know this person sneaking around my house? She found the place for a new entry and wrote, "Did you lose a piece of jewelry at Alston Park? Found near the entrance on March 10th, mid-morning." Eleanor knew she shouldn't give details about the locket. That would only invite someone greedy to claim it. She listed her email and phone number and pushed send. She checked every day, but besides a few people thanking her for being honest, there were no leads, until this response appeared. There was a cross-country meet that day. Perhaps someone from a visiting school lost the item you found. You might check with the high school. This was turning into a detective story of its own. How many high schools were involved in the meet? She started by calling her local school and leaving a message.
Closing out our readings today is Chrissy Langwell.
Oh no, we have Joan.
Oh, Joan. I didn't mean to slight you.
Oh, that's okay. I'm here.
Joan is a Redwood Writers member. She reads today from her story, A Fresh Start, page 204.
Thank you, Jen. I have to move this down, way down. Okay, I'm reading an excerpt from my novel that I'm starting and writing, actually, called There May Not Be Another Day. The title of this story is called A Fresh Start. It begins in Saigon on February 9th, 1963. Friday evening, after surviving a nosedive landing at Saigon Sansanut Airport that morning, Australian reporter Michael Paxton was ready to meet his mentor for dinner. In spite of a long nap after the tumultuous arrival, Mike still felt fatigued and somewhat disoriented. The reporter he was replacing was tall, red-haired, very British Tony Hodges. He greeted Mike in the lobby with a smile. "Are you ready for some fine dining, Paxton?" Mike chuckled and shook Hodges' hand. "That was a really hard landing. I thought we were going to crash. That, plus the heat. I think I need a day or two to recover." "Yeah," said Hodges with a grin. "Yeah," said Hodges with a grin. "The pilots have to do that to avoid incoming shelling from the Viet Cong. You were lucky. Sometimes the planes have to be rerouted to Bangkok. Well, this place is top-notch. Maybe a nice dinner will make up for your rough start." They took the elevator to the restaurant, already packed with a mixture of Western and Vietnamese diners.
A waiter led them to a table and took their orders. Steak frites for Mike and boeuf bourguignon for Hodges. Looking around, Mike thought the elegant Art Deco ambience of the hotel's restaurant would have done justice to the finest bistro in Paris. While they ate, Hodges filled him in with the information he needed to know at the bureau come Monday. The boss will be there to meet you before he goes on to his day's social agenda, so be there before 8. Mike nodded. That's Mr. Drake. I received a welcome aboard letter from him. Yeah, said Hodges, mopping up the sauce from his stew with a piece of baguette, but the de facto boss is Bill Gilmore. He actually runs the show. Right now we're short-handed, so there's a lot of pressure on the staff to get the best stories out to the world before our competitors do. Did you receive any technical training at headquarters? You mean on using the equipment? Right, Hodge nodded. We're short on cameramen and soundmen. We needed someone to train the Vietnamese staff. Mike sighed. Well, we spent a couple days on it, but not enough to make me an expert. I did some reporting in Japan, but that was on top of a well-equipped truck. I just had to report the action. Well, it's more complicated here, said Hodges. So how did you end up in Saigon? Dressed as you are, you look more like a diplomat than a lowly reporter. Mike chuckled. Credit that to the suit I bought in London with just that effect in mind. I'll have to write a complimentary note to the tailor. Hodges laughed and then gave Mike a long look. They send us mostly inexperienced younger men from local stations. Some work out, and others have difficulty with the climate, the people, the food, and so on. So I'm curious, why did you choose Vietnam? This is a war zone, and it is dangerous. Mike met Hodges' gaze. Headquarters was quite clear about the unsafe conditions here. Let's just say I earned a few black marks in Sydney for supporting the wrong people in a political crisis. You can't accuse one of the wealthiest men in Australia of corruption without expecting some backlash, and especially if that man happens to be your ex-father-in-law. There's more to it, but that's the crux of the matter. Mike sighed. No, he didn't want to go into that now. Too complicated. Maybe sometime later when he was drunk and he knew Hodges better. So they blackballed you, Hodges said. Yes, Mike replied. Exonerated after the fact, but nonetheless unemployable in Australia at the moment. I try to report objectively on what I see and know, and that's all. Then Mike added, as an afterthought, I suppose that sounds naive. Hodges set the bread he was about to put in his mouth on his plate, and he gave Mike a serious look. I'm going to worry about you, Paxton. That's not how things are done here. You'll get eaten up by all the sharks before you can cry for help. Surprised by the sudden tone in Hodges' voice, Mike paused and leaned forward and said, Well, then enlighten me.
Starting over. Closing out our readings today is Chrissy Langwell, current Redwood Writers President. With Judy, she bookends our program today by reading from Amelia's Traveling Bookshop, page 117.
Hi, I'm Chrissy Langwell, and I'm reading Amelia's Magic Traveling Bookshop. Just a little note, I will be reading a portion of it, and then we're going to skip a page, and I'll tell you when that happens. The second-hand clicks on my mother's old clock, counting down the seconds to when I would say goodbye to Amelia's Book Lounge, named after me when I was only 3 years old. My mom had had such grand visions for her bookshop, but 5 years after her passing, I've managed to run this place into the ground. Now here I am in the final 5 minutes of business, and not one person has come in to buy a book. Not even a good old-fashioned everything must go sign could bring me new readers. Brrr, my Maine Coon cat chirps beside me on the counter. You're right, Pajamas. It's quitting time. I stroke her fur, then move around the counter to turn the sign to closed and let it remain that way forever. Tomorrow I'll pack up the store. But tonight, I'll enjoy a whole bottle of wine and a carton of ice cream while I search Craigslist for my next job. Just as I'm about to reach the door, however, it opens with a jingle of bells, followed by a breathless man. Are you still open? He's about my father's age, from what I can tell, his peppery hair clinging to his sweaty brow like he ran the whole way here. Of course. Can I help you find anything? I vow to remain open as long as he wants. He can search the shelves all night. A bathroom. I lose my customer service smile and point toward the room in the back. He makes haste, leaving me with pajamas, wishing I'd turned the sign 5 minutes earlier. I look out the window while I wait, noting the Volkswagen bus sitting against the curb, a for sale sign in the window. It's red and white, just like a model one I had as a kid. I used to push that car around, pretending I was traveling the countryside with no home to call my own. The guy returns from the bathroom looking a whole lot more relaxed. Can I help? Sorry about that. The air conditioner quit about an hour ago and it's hot as blazes, and my bladder... He waves his hand. Sorry, TMI. He shoots me an apologetic smile, then pushes through the door. I watch as he leaves, my breath quickening when I see him unlock the front door of the VW bus. Sir! I burst outside and jog to him. He turns, a secret in his smile. The bus, I say, is for sale? I don't know why I'm asking. I have nothing left. It is. Do you want to take a look? He leans close. Careful. It's magic, he teases. I don't doubt it. How much is it? He could say $5 and I couldn't pay him. Well, I haven't decided yet, he admits, but for the right person, I'd work something out. I'm a goner when he opens the sliding door. It has bookshelves? My eyes rake over shelves of books with latching doors. It's as if this bus was made for me. I can't help fantasizing about owning my own traveling bookshop, spreading joy through books all across the country. He peers in, almost as if he's surprised, but then he grins. It sure does. Why don't you take it for a spin? I have no business feeding this fantasy. Still, I nod my head, eyes wide, and he places the keys in my hand. I look at them, in awe of even holding them. I want this bookmobile so bad. It's going to break my heart to tell him I can't afford it. But when I look up, there's no one there. I look to the right, to the left, back in the shop. Then I search the bus. Pajamas hops in with a chirp, then finds her place in the passenger seat. Next to her is my purse, which I don't remember retrieving. Behind her are shelves filled with books. The man is gone, and everything about this van feels like it was meant for me. What if I just went? I sit in the driver's seat, turning the key in the ignition. I'm met by a blast of cold air from the air conditioner. His AC works just fine, I tell Pajamas. Brr, she agrees. I put the car in drive, trying not to think too hard as I head for places unknown. We are skipping to page 120 for those who are following along. At the very bottom. I don't get far. The bus sputters and coughs on the coastal highway, then winds to a stop at a long turnoff overlooking the ocean. I turn the key, but the engine only utters a death rattle. I think I know why the bus was for sale, I tell Pajamas. Never mind that it was free. Now I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere with a bunch of books and a useless vehicle. I get out and open the trunk, revealing an engine I know nothing about. I fiddle with a few things, coming away with grease on my hands and no solution. I'm about ready to kick the tires, but that's when I notice a girl at the cliffside, a canvas in front of her and a frustrated look on her face. Then she winds up and throws one of her paintbrushes over the cliff. I watch in horror as it drops out of sight. What are you doing? I run toward her. Quitting. She winds up again. I snatch the brush from her hand before she can throw it. You can't quit. I look at her painting, noting her version of the ocean gracing the canvas. You're quite talented. I'm not, though. See there? My proportions are all wrong. The colors are muddy. The shadows aren't consistent. She goes on, pointing out things invisible to my eye. I never would have noticed, I say honestly. I notice. I have an art show coming up next week and nothing is turning out right. I don't know what to do. She sighs. The great Hannah Alistair. Wait till they find out I'm a fraud. I look at the painting, which still looks pretty good to me. Then I look at the van. Hannah, is it? Well, Hannah, maybe I can help. I have a whole bus of books over there. Most are on writing, but I might have something that will help you see things in a different light. If anything, a break could help. Would you like to take a look? I guess. She places her brushes on the easel and follows me to the bus. I slide open the door and her eyes widen. Wow, you weren't kidding. She steps in and gasps at the first book she picks up. This one on Monet. I saw it once in a bookstore in France and haven't been able to find it since, but you have it. She continues perusing the shelves, eliciting breathy exclamations as she finds one book after another. I'll take all of these. She thrusts a stack of 20 books at me. I ring them up, realizing that I've sold more today than I have in the last week at the store. I tidy the van when she's done, looking at the shelves as I do. They are all books about art, some picture books, others on technique, and all wildly fascinating. But when I take a second look, all I see are dusty old tomes with uninteresting titles. Nothing about art, nothing about writing. I get back into the driver's seat and just for kicks start the bus again. This time it springs to life, purring just like pajamas in the passenger seat. Careful, it's magic, that guy had told me. I think I'm starting to understand.
Thanks to everybody who read, everybody who came, everybody who contributed. It's been a wonderful day. I thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you.